had I been a defense attorney first, I would have been a much better prosecutor. And I almost feel like it should be a requirement that prosecutors handle a case on this side first. I really did not realize how much power that I had as a prosecutor, to really just ruin someone's life.
From the very moment a defendant is involved in this system, someone else has control over their story. They want to define that person solely by the crime they may have committed. You have a sentencing date set, and the stakes are high. Both lawyer and client need to do everything in their power to prepare. But the question is, are you ready? I'm Doug Passon. I'm a 25-year defense lawyer, a sentencing consultant, and an award-winning documentary filmmaker. In Set for Sentencing, I'm going across disciplines and outside the box to help both lawyer and client expand their perspective, build on their skills, and get real results in the form of significantly reduced sentences. All of this in service to one goal: to bring more fairness, more compassion, and more justice to the sentencing process. So, are you ready? Then let's get set for sentencing. Hey everybody, it's Doug Passon coming to you from Studio 3553 in Scottsdale, AZ. With us today to help us get set for sentencing is extraordinary white-collar criminal defense lawyer and good friend, Ashley Adams. Ashley is the president and CEO of Ashley D. Adams, PLC. It's a law firm that specializes in white-collar criminal defense cases, representing corporate and individual clients in federal and state criminal trials, investigations, healthcare, qui tam cases, regulatory and administrative matters. Now, one of the big things, and I'm so excited to have Ashley Adams here today. I'm still going through her bio. It's very, very impressive and long, but she is a former United States assistant attorney, so a U.S. attorney, an assistant United States attorney, meaning a federal prosecutor. So we're going to talk to her a little bit about that today. And she's also a former partner of the law firms of Phoenix Law Group and O'Connor Kavanaugh. She's very active in white-collar and healthcare fraud groups. She's actually named by the National Trial Lawyers as one of the top 100 in criminal defense. And Adams & Associates was named the best white-collar criminal defense firm by ranking in Arizona in 2021. There's a lot more to this bio, but I can't wait to dig in. So I just want to say hello, Ashley, and welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored that you even thought of me, number one. And you're one of my favorite people. You have so many talents, and I had such a great experience watching your presentation on storytelling and sentencing up in Prescott.
Oh, thanks.
I'm just really honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're sweet.
You made me sound so impressive too. Thanks.
Well, you are impressive, which is why you were at the very top of my list of people that I wanted to have come on Set for Sentencing. And so what I love to do with anyone who comes on the podcast is storytelling, first and foremost, because I believe that is the heart and soul of sentencing advocacy. And so I love to hear people's stories, and I would love it if you could share with us sort of your origin story in the law. What made you walk that path?
Well, I have no other talents, first of all. I can't sing like you. I can't play the guitar. I just always knew I wanted to be an attorney. My grandfather was a prosecutor. My uncle was a prosecutor. Lots of lawyers in my family. I love to read. So it was just kind of a natural progression. I have a lot of stories as to how I got where I am. I think my favorite story is my first evaluation as a young partner at my old law firm. They told me that my hair was too long and my skirts were too short, and that I was never going to be respected by clients and never make it as a lawyer.
Wow.
So, that's devastating when you're a young lawyer. I went home and I cried and called my mom, and my mom was like, you need to go back to that law firm and you need to make partner and then you can quit. So, yeah, that's a little fun law story for
Were
you.
those, by the way, were those men lawyers or women lawyers that laid that bullshit on you?
Yeah, it was a man lawyer. And I don't hold any grudges. I learned so much at that firm, but I think back about if somebody said that to a woman now, it would just be shocking.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff was normal when I first started practicing. It was part of what you expected to deal with as a
Yep.
young woman lawyer. So I'm so glad it's not like that, at least as much anymore for the up and coming young lawyers today.
Yeah. Well, part of the great stories are getting knocked down and getting back up again. And I think that when somebody tells you you can't do something, even though it levels you in the moment and makes you cry and want to call your mom, because I've had a lot of those moments myself, what it does is it's fuel for the fire, and clearly it has been for you given your long resume and successes here. So let me just ask you though, on the origin story, was there anything in life you ever else imagined yourself doing besides lawyer?
No, actually, if you look at my eighth grade yearbook, we're supposed to put down what we wanted to be, and it actually says lawyer next to my name, which is embarrassing. But I
I
didn't
love it.
want to be an astronaut, or I didn't want to be president. I wanted to be a lawyer. But I love being a lawyer. I'm just so grateful that I have the ability to be in this profession. I mean, not every day. There's some days that are tougher than other days, but for the most part, I'm very blessed to have been a part of this profession. Truly.
Very nice. I think if you looked at my eighth grade yearbook, it would probably say criminal, like most likely to go to jail. Um,
I doubt that.
well, you'd be surprised, but that's a whole other podcast. So I wanna zero in now on your time as prosecutor, because you spent a lot of years in as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Arizona. That's how I met you. I think the first time I met you was maybe a case you had with my old good friend Darrow.
Yes,
And that you were at a party at his house, and which was many, many, many
yes, I
moons
miss
ago.
him.
I miss him too, desperately. But here's one of your many dubious distinctions in my eyes. You're one of a select group of prosecutors who became defense lawyers that I think are really, really awesome defense lawyers. And I'm sorry if there's prosecutors listening. I'm not talking about you, whoever you are, that listening, because you're really good. I promise. But, you know, sometimes people go into prosecution because they really believe in that side of it, and then when it's time to go out and make the salary of maybe a private lawyer, the criminal defense is the natural progression because criminal law, but their heart's not maybe always in it. They're going through the motions and they're not able to connect with their clients and kind of see the person behind the crime. And you connect. I mean, you so clearly get it. So first of all, just tell me about your transition from, because you didn't. Did you do any criminal defense before you went to prosecution? All right, so tell me about that journey from prosecutor to defense lawyer.
Yeah, well, I practiced civil law for 10 years before I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And my law firm at the time, O'Connor Kavanaugh, was, sort of breaking up. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And Bob Bartels, I don't know if you know Professor Bartels at ASU, called me and he said, "Hey, we need somebody over here in the civil division at the U.S. Attorney's Office." So I applied and I got the job. So I did civil, actually ACE, which is affirmative civil enforcement. So I did like False Claims Act stuff for the first year and a half that I was there. And then I transferred down to white collar. So I did that. I was in the white collar unit, I think, for like 6 years before I left. So I wasn't there like a huge amount of time, like a lot of people are. I had some personal things in my life. My kid's father got sick with cancer, and I needed to
Mm.
be close to them and close to home. So it really, I honestly, it wasn't my choice, but now that I look back, it was the best thing that I ever did because I think truly I am a defense attorney at heart. I feel like this is the challenging side of the house. Being a prosecutor was great, but so much of what you do and what you work on is really pushed by agents, and they do a lot of the work for you. They prepare reports. They've done all the witness interviewing and all that stuff. I mean, it's kind of handed to you on a silver platter. Whereas on this side, we have to do all the work ourselves. So I find this work to be much more rewarding, much more challenging. But I don't think I was one like-minded. Well, I take that back because I've heard people say when I first came out of being a prosecutor that I still had that prosecution mindset. I don't know what that means, but I think it did take me some time to adjust. I mean, for sure.
That's so I wasn't actually intending to go down this road, but it's so interesting when you talk about just the distinction about working up a case as a defense lawyer and a prosecutor, because as you say, you have these agents and investigators and these people who are out in the field and getting up close and personal with the people, and the crime and gathering the evidence and writing the reports, and their job is to put it all in a nice package in a file and hand it to you. So right out of the gate, you're dealing with a stack of paper rather than, the human beings behind that,
Right.
which is to me the quintessential. Well, first of all, it's my biggest problem with the system, that I believe the whole system is set up that to strip the humanity out of the process. That every time our clients, our defend, our defendants, who I hate calling defendants, but our clients are a stack of paper and a file, and they're judged by their worst moment in life, and everybody else has control of that story. Now, interestingly, when you get the file handed to you, your FBI agents or whoever have control of that story. So, what I'm curious to know is
They ever.
what happens when you get handed this thing on a silver platter, as you say, and you smell a bunch of bullshit. In other words, you have to rely on the integrity and the honesty of your agents. A, that they're accurately representing what these people are saying and what happened, and B, that they're not holding anything carefully back. So because you as a prosecutor have a legal obligation to disclose what we call exculpatory information, meaning if there's anything that tends to mitigate the crime or show that the person's innocent, legally, as a prosecutor, you're required to hand that over. And agents know this. They're schooled in the law. So in order to skirt that, I'm told, I've never been a prosecutor, but they won't give it to you. So you don't have to give it to us. Is there any story? Is that a real issue, or is that just something defense lawyers like to complain about?
You know, uh, Gosh, I think I would say it is a real issue. And I think it really depends on the prosecutor. I know there are prosecutors that are open doors. They don't hide anything. They show you their hand. They give you all the discovery. You don't have to worry about it. There's others, and I hate to say this because my daughter scolds me, but I think that the up and coming generation have more of a tendency to want to make a name for themselves, and they do hold back information, and they're not digging into the files, and they're relying solely on their agents, maybe because they're too busy. I don't know, but I don't feel like um, some of the newer lawyers that I've seen are doing the due diligence that they need to do. But it just you truly cannot trust everything that the agents are telling you.
Yeah.
And I, without slandering agencies, I will say when I got a file from the IRS, I knew it was good work. I knew I could rely on it. I knew they had done their homework. I knew the exhibits would be attached to the report. I, FBI, not so much.
Yeah,
It was
that's
just they
surprising.
don't record here, they don't record statements, and there's always BS in the 302s, and so it depends on who you're dealing with, really.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it depends on the culture of the office too. If the fish rots at the head. So if the supervisors and the heads of the office don't really uh, care that much what their line attorneys are doing, and there's not going to be consequences for violating these rules or ethics, then that's a whole other thing. Now, I will say that I've been practicing all over the country now, and I often find myself missing home because I was 12 years at the dealing with prosecutors in Arizona, in the District of
Right.
Arizona, and by and large, it's a great office, and the attorneys are
Yeah.
most of them are open books like that, and
Right.
I mean, it's
I would agree with you.
yeah.
I have the same experience. And
Yep.
especially the white collar unit, I really, with maybe one exception, I really am not worried about not
Yeah.
getting Brady information.
Yeah. And I hate to say nice things about prosecutors and prosecutors' offices. So, but there it is. That may be the only thing. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, um, so talk about the transition going from prosecutor to defense. What do you think maybe is one really big thing that you learned in that transition that you wish you had known during your time as a prosecutor?
Well, I think I shared with you, I shared this with you before. And had I been a defense attorney first, I would have been a much better prosecutor. And I almost feel like it should be a requirement that prosecutors handle a case on this side first. And not to say that I wasn't human, but I wasn't human. I didn't see things from the human side of things. I had no idea what kind of an impact that having a felony on your record would have for the rest of your life. And I wasn't a young girl. I just didn't know. I didn't realize it. Um, I never had to deal with families. We had a victims' right unit, victims' rights. And so unless I was going to trial, I never talked to anybody except the agents. As a defense attorney, usually the defendant most of the time understands what they did and that they have to be punished. But their kids and their wife and their parents, that's very hard. That's the hardest part of my job, is to try to console them and help them to understand. And I think the third thing, or the second thing, is that I really did not realize how much power that I had as a prosecutor, to really just ruin someone's life. I remember I had this one case. It was a stupid case too. It was this guy was selling fake gold coins to some elderly people, which is bad. He should be punished. But he was kind of an older guy, and he had a story. He had lost his job and blah blah blah. And I just really didn't care. My job was to try to get him as much time as I possibly could, or at least I thought that's what my job was. And he went away for 5 years, and that case
Mm.
has really haunted me. I had another guy that we were prosecuting kill himself right before trial, and that
Oh.
was just
Mm.
devastating. And he shot himself outside the casino out there by the Fort McDowell
Wow.
casino. So they didn't find him for a few days, but so he didn't show up for trial. And, that was just crushing. I just thought, oh, I'm just a terrible person. And, those kinds of things happen. But I learned that you can really, really screw up somebody's life. So you need to think about why you're recommending what you're recommending for a sentence, or whether somebody should even be prosecuted in the first place.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, we did talk about the gold coin guy, but I didn't know that story about the suicide and that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Um,
a big burden, and you think, what if, could we have done something to save him? I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah. And this is where I think that I can cut some slack to prosecutors and judges, because I think it's just a natural human response to put up a wall to guard yourself against feeling all those emotions and internalizing the suffering of the person on the other end of this. Because if you really felt that deeply about all of these folks that you were prosecuting, it'd be very hard to do your job.
Yeah. I
But
find
on the other
myself-
hand, there's time. Yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just say I find myself just doing just the opposite on this side. I internalize things too much, and it's
Hmm.
hard. It's hard to sleep at night when your client may be going away the next day for however long.
Yeah. Well,
It's
and that's probably why so many lawyers carry a lot of baggage, like substance abuse. And not saying Ashley Adams does; she's clean as a whistle. But I'm just
I
saying
have
we
a
have
life
high
that's right over
our
here. It's full.
our profession is hazardous to our
Yes.
health. We've
Yes.
lost a lot of our colleagues to various things, and it's not easy. And I think that is because we're vicariously ingesting all the trauma all around. And it's not just of our clients; it's victims too. Like you can't go into a crime of violence and look at autopsy photos and not be impacted by that.
Yeah, our
Um,
child porn photos, that's always a
yeah,
horrible experience. But yeah, it
absolutely.
is. But we do what we do because we want to help people. And you help people if you get to know them and you can tell their story, just like you said, and you can learn about them. And I think the more you learn about them, the more you can advocate for them. You and like you've said in your presentation that I saw that was so excellent, there's so many, you can say something so many ways. You can say, you can tell a story in just a few sentences, or you can set a scene, and have the jury feel like they were really there.
Mhm.
The sight, the smell, the sounds, what was it like? What was happening at that time that would have caused this person to do whatever they did. And that's just such a more effective form of advocacy, but you can't do that unless you immerse yourself in the case, right?
Right. And defense lawyers, more than anyone else in the system, that's our task. And then when you do it right, then the prosecutor is forced to see the human side of this, and they will be moved, and the judge too. I got in a lot of trouble I do a lot of presentations, and I say our job as defense lawyers is to make judges suffer. And I got in a lot of trouble for that. But guess what? I was simply quoting an article written by a district judge from Colorado, Judge Kane, and he wrote it after the guidelines became discretionary after Booker. And he said it used to be easy. It was plug in the numbers and don't deviate from what the guidelines say. And judges didn't have to really think too much. And he said after Booker, they should be agonizing over every single sentencing decision to come out with the right result. They should be suffering through that.
I think
And
that's a great quote. They
it is
should.
a great quote. And I take it one step further based on what you're saying, which is I want them to, our clients are our clients mostly because of some kind of suffering. There's, people who are listening to this who don't know defense lawyers and who maybe are a little towards the right and saying, why do you feel so bad for what's happening to him? Why do you feel so bad about sending him to jail? They committed a crime. They made a choice, and now they made their bed and they have to lie in it. So what's the problem? And the problem is that they're human beings. We're all fallible. We make mistakes. And usually there's something really, really horrible going on in somebody's life that causes them to do this. It may be mental illness. It may be addiction. It may be bad, toxic, abusive relationship. You name it. But
Exactly.
if you're not going to
I
get
would
dig
say
down,
95% of our cases that's what's going on. Something terrible has happened in their lives, or their past, something they never dealt with, substance abuse, war, who knows what it
yeah,
is. But it's
right.
they're good people that made a bad mistake, in my most of my experience.
I'm gonna add. This is so far afield; it just popped into my head. But we're having a talk here. But you're a white collar person, and so you're the best person to ask. I do a fair amount of white collar cases on the sentencing mitigation video side, right? So I'm not the
Yes.
actual lawyer handling the case, but I'll join the team and I'll help tell the client's story. And so many times in white collar fraud cases with male clients, there's an issue in their childhood where dad was not around for whatever reason. Dad was gone. And I keep seeing this theme come up over and over and over again. I haven't fully been able to connect the dots, but it almost seems to me like, you know, there's something going on there. There's like, I don't know. I was just wondering, do you see that in your case? Have you seen that too, or am I hallucinating that?
I don't know so much in white collar if I've seen much of that,
Yeah.
but I think that's a common theme in most defendants. There's a loss that they've never dealt with, that they're overcompensating for, that they're undercompensating for. If you want, I have a story I can share with you. About a gentleman who I represented, who was just an amazing fellow. And he was charged with cyber terrorism, which is really serious. I didn't realize how serious it was. I didn't know what it was, but it's basically a form of domestic terrorism. And he was a veteran, an Air Force veteran, had served our country in Iraq for like 8 or 9 years. And he was one of those radio communication guys, on the field, like right in the middle of combat, completely hairy, had seen a lot of stuff. And when he got out, he moved to Singapore, married this really nice lady. But he had this thing about people having his information. He had gotten his identity stolen, and he was really pissed off because he kept getting these letters, just letters like we all get, these weird advertisements. So he was making threats to these companies that were sending him letters. And a couple times he said he was going to do a mass shooting, and he didn't really mean it, but he was writing these things on the internet, right? So he gets charged. And, when I met this guy, I'm like, he just doesn't seem like somebody that would threaten to kill anybody. And so we really just dug into his life. I mean, through a neuropsychologist and also just me listening. And, he was, as a child, his father, when he came back from Vietnam, was extraordinarily abusive, to the point where he and his brother, he was locked in like a shed for a day or so. I mean, just horrible,
Mm.
unimaginable abuse that he had never talked about,
Mm.
and then put a war and combat on top of that. He had just been internalizing all these things for all of his life and never had done counseling or anything. And ultimately he was, by my wonderful neuropsych, he was seen and treated, and he had an anxiety and PTSD disorder, which manifested itself in this anxiousness and obsessiveness, which led to the offense.
Mhm.
And I would just say, and it ended up being a happy ending, which, we can talk about later, but I see that so often, so often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that is what I call. So I talk about the three R's. There's three types of sentencing stories, and the first one is revelations stories, and that's I think a quintessential revelation. It's peeling back the layers, revealing some hidden truth or some story that we didn't know, that puts the case in context. Right? He's not a violent person. He's not doesn't have the intent to hurt anybody. Just you can't have all that trauma and psychological turmoil build up and not have some way to let it all out. And sometimes, you know,
Yeah,
um,
and I've just taught, going back to prosecutors. This was a case that was totally overcharged, and it had such serious implications. Congress really upped the penalties for domestic terrorism, and so I had to work really hard to figure out what I was going to do for this guy, and I discovered that there is a veterans program in the federal system. And this was several years ago, so I didn't know about it because it was fairly new back then. The states had a veterans program for some time, but Judge Silver in our district now oversees that. And I thought, he would be a great candidate for this program. And so, between the psych evaluation and the report and just mounds of other information, I finally was able to convince the prosecutor that, this was an appropriate resolution of the case. Let him get treatment, not prison. And then if he fails, then, he's going to go to prison.
Yep.
So it was just a really great case for me because I really liked this person. He was such an amazing human being in so many ways, and it was a good result. He made it through the program, and he doesn't have a felony on his record, and he has an adopted son now. It's just a great story. So one of my favorites. Yeah.
And that's amazing. And the reason I think I love that story so much is because it has another R, and it's my favorite R, and it's the redemption stories.
Yes.
That we swim in such dark waters that if we can't show hope, that we have to be able to show hope that a person is worthy of another chance, but then when we can actually show that they got the help and they fixed their lives, and the message is a powerful one just from a basic legal standpoint, which is, Judge, you're not gonna have to worry anymore. This person's never gonna be before you again because we figured out why he did what he did and we fixed it. And there's nothing more powerful that you can present in a sentencing case than a good old-fashioned redemption story. So I love that.
That is so true. I really like that method. Yes.
So then the third R, which I won't explain, but I'll just throw it out there, is my relativity stories. We compare this to that, but that's for another day. But now you have the three R's.
Yay.
Maybe
I read half of it last night. So.
Oh, okay, cool. Well,
Yes.
so what I do in these things is I put little, helpful things in the show notes. So I'm going to post that article, The 3 R's of Sentencing Storytelling, for anyone who hears this podcast and thinks they might want to learn more about that. You can download that article for free. Okay, but you raised another huge, important, awesome point, and it's back to the prosecutor thing. And you said what you said when you
prosecutor for a long time. I don't remember. I blocked it out of my memory.
No, but you can speak to this as an outstanding defense lawyer because you know this to be true on whatever side you're on, and that is the prosecutors have too much fucking power in this system. Because what you said in this case with your veteran was the case was overcharged. And so for anybody who's like thinking, okay, you're going off field because this is a sentencing podcast, sentencing starts with the charges because the prosecutor gets to pick what the most serious charges. A lot of times they have mandatory minimums. So what that does is it shapes what the sentencing parameters will be months or years down the road, and sometimes ties the judge's hands about what she can do at sentencing. So I would like you to speak to this idea of too much power in charging decisions and plea decisions, because they hold all the cards when it comes to plea bargaining a lot of times too.
Well, first of all, Maricopa County is the absolute worst when it comes to that. But I know this is more of a federally program.
No, not really. It's for state. Tell us how bad does Maricopa County suck?
It's so bad. And they do it on purpose because they know that Arizona has such harsh mandatory sentencing laws, and the judges' hands are tied. Unlike the federal system, if somebody pleads to this charge of the class 2 felony, they're looking at a presumptive sentence of 5 years. So, yeah, and that's a whole nother discussion. But
can I tell you a quick story on that front?
Yes.
When I was a baby public defender, it was right after the Columbine shooting, so everybody was on edge about kids with guns. Yeah. And I had a 16-year-old kid who was getting bullied by some kids in the neighborhood, and he went inside and he got an unloaded, basically antique shotgun, that was on display in the house, walked out on his front porch, pointed it at these three neighborhood boys, and yelled, "Who's the pussy now?" and went back inside the house. That was the crime. Now, these boys go home and tell mommy what he did. He gets charged as an adult, even though he's 16, because it's a crime of violence, and it's a dangerous crime because it involves a gun and because it involves children. Now, talk about mandatory minimums. 3 counts because there are 3 kids, and it involves a gun.
Yep.
So it's mandatory minimum because it involves a gun, even though it's unloaded and probably didn't even work. And because they're kids, there's something called DCAC, Dangerous Crimes Against Children, which means those counts have to run consecutive.
Yes,
So this kid, this 16-year-old boy, was facing 30 years in prison for pointing an unloaded shotgun. Now,
was this at the county?
Yeah, this was at the
And I'm
county.
sure they were like, we're going to stack these charges and your client's never getting out of jail.
So back on the subject of dehumanizing and reducing someone to a stack of paper in a file, the county attorney in this jurisdiction had a plea policy book. So all you do is flip open the book, say, what are the crimes, how often they've been in trouble, and it spits out the plea offer. And you know that out of the gate, the prosecutor made an offer of 10 years in prison for this boy, for this child.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. It's even worse in the cities. I mean, the lower you go, the less experienced, I'll use that term, that they are. But, back to prosecutorial discretion, as a defense attorney, you need to know that the judges really, really follow the recommendation of the prosecutor. And so, you can't expect to go to sentencing and, do everything there. You need to start selling your mitigation to the prosecutor from the very beginning of the case and get them on board to the fact that your client isn't the worst person on earth, the fact that your client may have mental health issues, get them examined, get the character letters, whatever mitigation you have, give that to the prosecutor in advance so that they can start coming closer to where you want your sentence to be. Because, the judges, and I wish they didn't follow the recommendations of the prosecutors as often as they do, but they do. And that's just reality. So the work has to start right at the beginning of the case, especially if you're not going to trial. If you're going to try to, you need to get this person the best sentence you can, you've got to start from day one.
Mm-hmm. Day one. That's a very common rookie mistake, I guess I would say, with defense lawyers, that they get the case, they work up the case, they see what the defense is, and then maybe they settle it, and then they sign a plea, and then they go plead guilty, and then they get a sentencing date. They're set for sentencing, which is a month or two down the road, and that's when they start developing the mitigation story for sentencing.
Yeah,
No.
it's unreal. I mean, mitigation should be part of your client interview. When you first start talking and learning their story, which, by the way, I think takes, especially for a really serious crime. I mean, you should have multiple meetings with your client and let them tell their story. Let them explain to you their history, their background, their family, everything that you can grab onto to try to explain what happened.
Yep.
Yeah, I do agree. That is a big mistake. And I try to train my law clerks, because I usually have a law clerk or two that works for me. And I try to, from the very beginning, when the client comes in, this is what we need to do. This is these are all the questions that we need to be asking. And you shared with me yesterday a great piece of software that I'm going to take a look at and hopefully use, because that seems very, very helpful.
I was just going to mention that. So one of the things I do at the beginning of the case, if I can, is I have my client fill out what's called a defense map. And if you're listening to this and you want to check it out, go to defensemap.com. And what it is a comprehensive online confidential mitigation questionnaire, and it digs deep. And it's not just for sentencing mitigation, but that's the bulk of it. But it could be for defenses and things like that too. It's very versatile. It's very in depth. It's free. That's probably the most important
Yeah.
part, because we can't always hire a great mitigation specialist or a great investigator to go out and collect all the records and the data. This is just an easy, free thing that you can do right off the bat to
Oh,
get a much deeper picture about what's happening in a case. So I know the
what was
guy
the
that,
one I think yesterday? It was like Justice something. There was another one.
yeah,
It was like $200 or something a month. But
uh-huh, I have, and I'm not familiar with it. And yeah, I think it was called Justice Story or something. I can't remember, but I'm plugging Defense Map just for first and foremost because it's free. But I've actually worked a lot with and talked a lot with the lawyer who created this free tool, and his heart is in the right place, and he put a lot of effort and thought into this. And so I love to sing the praises of Defense Map. In fact, I've already recorded a podcast with Charlie Asher all about Defense Map.
oh,
So
good.
I love that tool.
I'm going to listen to it. I can't
Yeah,
wait.
I think it's really, really, really helpful. Okay, so I think this has been amazing, and I love the stories
Well,
here.
you're amazing. I'm going to plug my friend Doug because not only is he a great
Thank
lawyer
you.
and a great storyteller, but he's also very talented.
You're
I
so sweet.
actually watched him one Saturday morning on Facebook, like jamming out with your guitar. I think you were singing with a friend or your wife, and he wrote a
That's great.
book. Like he just does all this stuff. So I'm very honored to be your friend. And I see you riding on the reservation on your bike sometimes too.
Yeah, well, I like law is stressful. It's good to have other ways to release, and I'm blessed because I get to sort of weave the creative elements that are beating in my heart into the law practice every day. This podcast is part of that, but obviously the sentencing video stuff. But I don't want to talk about me. Actually, I do. Let's talk about me some more.
Let's talk
No,
about me.
no, just kidding.
When
Um,
you're done talking about me, why don't you talk about me for a
but
while?
I do one more topic before we wrap it up, because I just got introduced to this topic, and I am doing a whole other podcast episode with a really cool, progressive, talented defense lawyer by the name of Patrick Barone out of the Detroit area.
Hmm.
And he's a criminal defense lawyer, and he spent a lot of time at the Jerry Spence Trial College
Yes.
and immersed himself in this thing called psychodrama. And when I was talking with you preparing for this podcast, you said that you are a huge fan of psychodrama, and you've started building that into your cases. So even though I'm going to do a deep dive with Patrick, I thought it would be cool for you to tell us what is psychodrama and how do you use it in your cases for sentencing.
Well, I have very limited experience. I have not graduated from the trial college, and I've actually never been to the trial college, but I have been to a number of psychodrama type of sessions. And I've worked with Louise Lippman, who is wonderful. And psychodrama is really a tool that you can use to get to know your client's story. You use things like doubling, role reversal, scene setting. But what's so interesting about psychodrama is that you really have to learn about yourself before you can learn about other people. And you need to learn about your biases and things that have plagued your own life and why you see things the way that you do or why you act the way that you do. And so the first thing that you do in psychodrama is you do like this deep dive into yourself, which is really kind of intense. But I love it. And I just worked on a plaintiff's case, which is very unusual for me, where my client was a victim of sexual misconduct by a teacher. And I found that the tool was so valuable to get me to get her to tell me her story so that I could then relay it. And so I would highly recommend that if you've never done psychodrama, that you take a class or read a book, because it's really changed my life in a lot of ways. It really has.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the beating heart of psychodrama is getting to empathy. This idea of sort of assuming the role of the other to see the world through
Yes.
their eyes
Yeah,
and
and you
really
can
connect.
do that with witnesses too. So,
Yeah.
if you're going to cross-examine a witness, you can actually have somebody be the witness and then you role reverse so that you put yourself, in their place or their shoes. And it's really effective. I mean, I certainly have so much to learn, but I've made it kind of a part of my life, and I really have enjoyed it. It's great.
Yeah. I wish I would have known about it sooner, and I'm at the very front end of the journey with this. And I've seen it in action. I think I'll save that for when Patrick comes on, because it was him.
Yeah.
It was his case that we were working on, that he did a psychodrama exercise with our client. I was doing a video in the case, and it's super, super powerful.
It
And,
is. It really is.
so the takeaway here is there are some lawyers. First of all, they don't teach us any of this stuff in law school. It's real data driven, and they teach us how to think like a lawyer. But our job in criminal defense is fundamentally a humanistic pursuit, and we have to learn how to be human beings and see the humanity in others more, and put the lawyer shit aside. So there are going to be a lot of lawyers who have this beaten into them. They have to unlearn everything they've learned, and they're going to say psychodrama sounds like a lot of psychobabble to me, or I
Sounds
would
like a
never,
bad pickup.
yeah, or I would never use a video in my case, or storytelling, that's just Hollywood fairy tales. No one wants to hear that. Nope, you got to unlearn everything that
Yeah,
they taught you.
you want to show the jury, not tell them, I think. I mean, you want them to feel, you want them to be, you want them to live and to understand.
Yeah,
Don't tell them.
yeah. Yeah, and show the judge and show the prosecutor and
Mhm.
show everybody, because there are walls built up, and we have to break them down. And by the way, just to circle the square on mitigation starts at day one, you also will hear lawyers push back on that to say, I'm a trial lawyer. I'm not here to plead my client out. I'm not worried about sentencing. I'm worried about defending my case. And I'm like, okay, well, that's all well and good, but look at the statistics. 95+% of your clients are going to plead guilty. They're never going to go to trial. So
Right.
they're going straight to sentence, do not pass go, do not collect a. And for those 5-ish% that you are going to go to trial, you're a great trial lawyer. You're not going to win every one. So that universe of clients who are going to end up at sentencing eventually just grew to about 99%. So let's go. You can walk and chew gum at the same time, right?
Yes.
So, thank you, Ashley. This was
Oh,
so good and so full of useful, like really tangible, useful, practical tips and great stories. So I can't thank you enough for taking
well, thank
this
you.
time on late on a Friday. I think it's probably almost wine o'clock. I wish we were in the
It's
same space
Friday.
to do that together, but hopefully I'll see you soon.
Well, I wish you the best with your podcast, and I'm so glad that you're doing this, and I'm just super proud of you.
Thanks,
You're a
Ash.
star.
Back at you. I'll talk to you soon.
See you later. Have a good weekend.
Hey, you too. Bye bye. That's it for today, but before we go, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to you, the listener, for spending time with us today getting set for sentencing. Whether you're a lawyer, someone who could use the help, or maybe you're just a true crime buff who loves the inside scoop on how this whole thing works, I am so glad you're here, and I hope you keep listening. If you like the podcast, please do me a favor. Spread the word about Set for Sentencing and give us a rating and review on the iTunes podcast platform. It would really help. Last but not least, if you're interested in knowing more about what I do, mitigation videos, case consults, live teaching, on-demand educational content, books, articles, all of it, please visit www.dougpassonlaw.com. I'm Doug Passon. Until next time, hang in there. Wait a minute, that's a stupid way to sign off a podcast about sentencing. Hang in there. What's the matter with you, man? I guess they call that gallows humor. Sorry. All right. Well, I will see you next time on Set for Sentencing. Bye-bye.